The night that left Elon Musk. Speechless. Elon Musk had no idea that night would change him forever. What started as a casual dinner with Donald Trump turned into something far more personal, something that cut straight to the core. As the sun dipped below the horizon, waves crashed gently against the shore of Mar-a-Lago. The grand estate, a fortress of power and wealth, felt quieter than usual. Inside, golden light from the chandeliers reflected off the polished marble floors, casting long shadows in the private lounge where Musk and Trump sat. Outside, the world buzzed with speculation, politics, scandals, the ever-present hum of media frenzy. But in this moment, none of that mattered. This was meant to be a closed-door meeting. AI, censorship, space colonization, maybe even the next election. Two of the most unpredictable minds on the planet face to face, no filters, no interruptions, except for one. Between them sat a boy, his feet swinging slightly against the chair. Elon's young son, XAE-12, though most just called him X. He had his father's piercing blue eyes filled with quiet intensity, like he was always thinking, always calculating. He wasn't supposed to be there, but Musk, in his usual unpredictable way, had brought him along. He wanted to come. Elon had shrugged when Trump's assistant raised an eyebrow. Trump, never one to turn down an audience, had laughed. Kids already got better taste than most politicians. And so they sat, 3 generations, 3 legacies, 3 futures. At first, the conversation was predictable: politics, the economy, AI. Musk spoke about the future, how civilization was teetering on the edge of something monumental, where choices made now could decide everything. Trump, always the deal-maker, leaned in. "So what's the move, Elon? You running for something? Or just pulling strings from the sidelines?" Musk smirked. "You know, I prefer to build things." Trump gestured vaguely. "That's what they said about me before 2016. A chuckle, a sip of whiskey. The air was charged, not with hostility, but with the weight of 2 men who had reshaped the world in their own ways. And then it happened. The shift. A quiet voice, smaller than theirs, but razor-sharp in its simplicity. X tilted his head, his gaze locking on to Trump. "Mr. Trump," he said, his voice clear and steady, "are you afraid of being forgotten?" Silence. Musk froze mid-sip. His eyes flicked to his son. Trump's expression faltered, just for a fraction of a second, so quick most people wouldn't have noticed. But Musk did. Then, as expected, Trump laughed. That signature. Trump laugh, part amusement, part performance. "Forgotten, kid, I've got my name on buildings from here to Scotland. They'll be talking about me long after we're all gone." X didn't blink. "That's not what I mean." Trump leaned back slightly. "Oh yeah? What do you mean?" And then, with a quiet confidence that made the room feel smaller, X spoke as if he had rehearsed this moment in his mind 100 times. Maybe he had. "I mean, when people talk about you 100 years from now, what will they actually say? Will they just remember your name? Or will they remember who you really were?" The air changed, not in a dramatic, made-for-TV way. No courtroom gasps, no debate stage knockout, just wait. A quiet, undeniable wait. For the first time that night, Trump had no instant comeback, no punchline, no retort. Something flickered across his face, not fear, not anger, something deeper, reflection. A man who had spent his entire life building a legacy, winning, dominating, making sure his name would never be forgotten, was now faced with a question that cut through it all. Would history remember the victories or the controversies? Would he be seen as a leader, a fighter, or just another name in a book filled with noise? Musk stayed silent. He wanted to see what Trump would say. Trump exhaled, fingers tapping against the table. And for the first time that evening, he didn't have an answer. The conversation that left Trump thinking. Trump finally spoke, his voice measured. "Well, kid," he said, "the trick isn't making people remember your name. It's making them remember why you mattered." X tilted his head. "And why do you think you matter?" The tapping of Trump's fingers against the table stopped. His eyes met the boy's. And for the first time all night, he didn't have an answer right away. Musk watched, intrigued. He had seen Trump talk his way out of impossible situations, outmaneuver governments, and crush political rivals with a single sentence. But now Trump was thinking, not performing, not defending, thinking. That's when Musk knew this conversation wasn't over. It was just beginning. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the distant hum of the ocean. Waves rolled against the shore, steady and unbothered by the weight of the question hanging between them. Trump, always quick on his feet, always in control of the narrative, was staring at the boy. Musk didn't intervene. He knew his son. He knew how his mind worked. X wasn't asking to be difficult. He wasn't challenging Trump for the sake of it. He was asking because he genuinely wanted to know, because he had been thinking about this for a long time. Finally, Trump leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His expression shifted, no longer the casual, joking tone he used in public. "I've built things," he said, his voice lower now, more personal. "More than most men ever will. Towers, hotels, casinos, golf courses, a presidency, you name it." X nodded. "And when those things are gone?" Musk almost smirked. His son never wasted words. He got straight to the point. Trump exhaled. "They won't be gone. My name is on them." X tilted his head. "But names fade." Musk caught it, that smallest flicker in Trump's eyes, because his son wasn't wrong. Time erodes everything. Buildings crumble. Businesses change hands. Even countries rewrite their own histories. What lasts? Trump tapped his fingers against the table again, a steady, rhythmic sound. Then, in a measured tone, he said, "It's not just about what you build. It's about how you make people feel." Musk raised an eyebrow. That was unexpected. Trump continued, "You think people remember George Washington just because his name is on a dollar bill? Number. They remember how he made them feel. They remember the fight, the leadership, the way he changed things." X listened intently, absorbing every word. Then he asked, "So, what did you change?" A beat of silence. Musk's gaze flicked to Trump. He was waiting too. Trump exhaled through his nose. "I woke people up." X furrowed his brow slightly. "I made people realize that power isn't just for the elite," Trump said, his voice firmer now. "That they don't have to listen to what some journalist or politician tells them, that they can fight." Musk could tell. This was the real answer. Not just words, but the core of how Trump saw himself. Trump leaned back slightly, watching X carefully. "You asked if I'm afraid of being forgotten. I'm not. Because I know one thing, I made them listen." X sat quietly for a moment, thinking. Then, in that same calm, unshaken voice, he said, "But being remembered isn't the same as being understood." Trump stilled. Musk saw it immediately. That rare moment when Trump wasn't sure if he was being challenged or given something to truly think about. The room felt heavier now. The conversation had shifted into something more than just a passing discussion. Finally, Musk spoke. "You changed things," he said, nodding slightly. "But do you think they'll remember the right things?" Trump narrowed his eyes slightly, but there was no anger. If anything, there was consideration, because that question wasn't just about him. It was about every leader who had ever tried to shape the world, every empire that had risen and fallen. What does history actually remember? What part of you does it keep? Trump exhaled, rubbing his fingers together. Then he glanced at Musk. You ever wonder about that? Musk shrugged. All the time. A smirk twitched at the corner of Trump's mouth. He gestured toward X. He gets it from you, doesn't he? Musk smiled faintly. No. He gets it from... The question that left Trump speechless. Trump studied X for a moment, then leaned forward, steepling his fingers. All right, kid, he said. Since you're so full of questions, let me ask you one. X blinked, but nodded. What do you think matters most? Trump asked. What makes a man truly remembered? A hush settled over the room. The only sound was the distant crash of waves against the shore. Candlelight flickered between them, casting long shadows across the table. X sat still, his fingers idly tracing the condensation on his glass. He wasn't nervous, he wasn't rushing, he was thinking. Finally, he looked up. It's not power, he said simply. Not money, not even the fight. Trump's brow lifted slightly, intrigued. X continued, his voice calm but certain. It's the way you change the people closest to you. Silence. Musk let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. That's actually profound. Trump, however, wasn't smiling. He was studying the boy, his face unreadable. Explain, he said. X leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. You talk about waking people up, he said to Trump, about making them listen. That's big. But history isn't just made by big moments, it's made by small ones too. Trump's eyes narrowed. Go on. Most people don't remember the names of kings, X said. They don't remember the exact words of speeches. What they remember is how those leaders changed the people they loved, how they shaped their parents, their families, their world. Trump exhaled slowly, listening. X didn't stop. You say people will remember you because you made them listen, but what if they remember the anger more than the message? What if they remember the fight, but not why you fought? Musk leaned back slightly, impressed. Trump was silent. Then, in a lower voice, he asked, So you think I failed? X shook his head. I think you changed the world. A pause. But I don't think you get to choose how history writes you. Something flickered across Trump's face, something deeper than he wanted to admit. He tapped his fingers against the table, the same steady rhythm Musk had come to recognize as his thinking gesture. Then, after a long moment, Trump asked, And what about your father? X blinked. Trump gestured toward Musk. You said people remember how a leader changes the ones closest to them, he said. So tell me, how did he change you? Musk arched an eyebrow but stayed silent. X glanced at his father, then back at Trump. And in complete honesty, he answered, he taught me that even the smartest man in the world can still be wrong. Musk smirked slightly. I'm assuming that's a compliment. X shrugged. It means you're not afraid to fail. And that's why people believe in you. Trump let out a slow exhale, shaking his head with something between amusement and deep thought. That's an interesting answer, kid. X nodded. Because it's true. The conversation should have lightened then, but it didn't. Something had shifted. The words still hung in the air, heavy, unshakable. History doesn't always remember the reasons, just the impact. Trump's expression hardened. He leaned in. So tell me, X, do you think you'll be remembered? X met his gaze, calm and unshaken. I don't care if I am, he said. Trump arched an eyebrow. Why not? X's answer came without hesitation. Because the people I love will remember me, and that's enough. Silence. For the first time all evening, Trump had no immediate response. Musk folded his arms. Now that's an answer. Trump exhaled, staring down at the table, rubbing his fingers together in thought. Then, In a voice barely above a whisper, he admitted something neither Musk nor X expected to hear. "I don't know if that's enough for me." Musk straightened slightly. X frowned. For just a second, Trump looked away, as if wondering whether he should have said that out loud. But the words were already there. Raw, honest, vulnerable. Musk had known Trump for years, but this was different. And before anyone could say another word, the moment Trump didn't have an answer. Trump's eyes sharpened slightly, but his voice was lighter when he spoke. "But I do know one thing." Musk and X waited. Trump smirked. "I like you, kid." X smiled faintly. "I know," Musk chuckled. "Took you long enough to admit it." Trump leaned back, shaking his head. And for the first time that night, he looked out at the ocean, not at the past. The waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, filling the silence that had settled over the table. The air smelled of salt and night, thick with something unspoken. For the first time, Trump didn't have an answer. Musk noticed it immediately. He had seen Trump in debates, in business deals, on the global stage, always with a comeback, always with a retort, always ready to win the conversation. But now he was just thinking. X, however, wasn't watching the ocean. He wasn't even looking at Musk. He was watching Trump. "You don't know if it's enough," X finally said, breaking the quiet. Trump exhaled sharply through his nose, glancing at the table. "I don't like losing," he admitted. "And I don't like being forgotten." Musk smirked. "You won't be forgotten." Trump's expression remained unreadable. X tilted his head. "Is that why you fight so much?" Trump's gaze snapped back up to him. X continued, his voice calm. "Because if you stop fighting, you feel like you'll disappear." Musk arched an eyebrow, watching closely. Trump studied the boy for a moment, his fingers tapping lightly against the wooden surface. Then, with a dry chuckle, he muttered, "You ask a lot of damn good questions for a kid." X shrugged. "Someone has to." Trump let out a breath and glanced at Musk. "You get this from you?" Musk smiled slightly. "Partially." Then after a pause he added, "Not entirely." Trump smirked. "That's an interesting way of saying you don't have all the answers." Musk chuckled. "Nobody does." X leaned forward slightly. "But you never answered my question?" Trump's smile faded just a little. "Which one?" X didn't hesitate. "What are you afraid of?" Silence. Musk sat up slightly, genuinely curious now. He wanted to hear the answer too. Trump tapped his fingers against the table, his signature move when he was deep in thought. He could have dodged the question, turned it into a joke, brushed it off like he had 1,000 times before. But for some reason, he didn't. Instead, he let the words sit there. Then softly, he said, "Becoming small." Musk blinked. X furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Trump exhaled slowly, not looking at either of them when he answered. "I've built, I've fought, I've been on the biggest stage in the world." His voice was measured, steady. "When you've done that, you know what the worst thing is?" X waited. Trump finally looked up, feeling like none of it mattered. Musk exhaled, rubbing his jaw. He understood that feeling. He had spent his life building impossible things, pushing humanity forward, making history. But deep down, in the quiet moments, he had wondered the same thing. Would it matter in the end? Would the world actually change? X's face remained unreadable. He let the words settle. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Then maybe you're asking the wrong question." Trump raised an eyebrow. "What?" X leaned forward slightly. "Instead of asking if the world will remember you," he said, "why not ask if the people closest to you will?" Trump went still. Musk narrowed his eyes, watching. X continued, because the world is big. The world forgets things fast, but the people who know you best, they remember who you really were. Trump's fingers stopped tapping. X's voice softened just slightly. And if they don't remember you the way you want, maybe that's the part that really scares you. Silence. For the first time all evening, Trump had nothing to say. Musk glanced at him, noting the shift in his expression. Then X leaned back, folded his arms, and smiled slightly. "Checkmate." Musk burst out laughing. Trump blinked, caught off guard. Then, after a moment, he laughed too. It wasn't the loud, performative laugh from his rallies. It wasn't the smug chuckle from his interviews. It was real. It was genuine. He shook his head, still chuckling. "Kid, I gotta admit, I didn't see that one coming." X grinned. "That's the best kind of checkmate." Musk smirked. "Now you know what it feels like." A conversation. Neither man expected. Trump let out a breath, shaking his head. "You're really raising a chess master here?" Musk shrugged. "I just let him think." Trump's smile lingered for a moment before he exhaled, turning his gaze back to the ocean. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about winning. He was just thinking. And as the waves crashed against the shore, something shifted. Because even though the world would always be watching Donald Trump, analyzing his every move, waiting for his next play, for the first time in years, he wondered if he had been watching the world the wrong way. The rhythmic crash of the waves filled the silence at the table. The laughter had faded, but something else lingered, something unspoken, something neither man had expected to feel. Trump leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He wasn't used to moments like this, real moments. Most conversations in his life were a battle of influence, dominance, perception. But this was different. Musk could feel it too. He had spent decades in boardrooms debating the brightest minds in the world, challenging conventional thought, and winning. But his son had just done something neither he nor Trump had anticipated. He had changed the conversation. Trump glanced at X, a smirk tugging at his lips. "So you play chess?" X grinned. "Every day." Trump nodded. "Me too, just a different kind." Musk chuckled. "Yes, but you just lost this round." Trump scoffed, but it wasn't his usual dismissive wave. He liked this kid. He liked the way he thought. Sharp, unpredictable, dangerous in the best way. Then suddenly, X's expression shifted, more serious, more deliberate. And just like that, the balance of the conversation shifted again. "I have another question," X said. Musk's smirk faded slightly. He knew that look. Trump raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Go on." X looked at Musk, then back at Trump. Then slowly he asked, "What's the biggest mistake you ever made?" The wind carried the question into the night. Musk inhaled through his nose, rubbing his jaw. He already knew where this was going. Trump, however, didn't react immediately. The people he had pushed away, the ones who might have been right. Trump leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. He studied X carefully. "What are you really asking?" X met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm asking if you ever walked away from someone you shouldn't have." Musk blinked. Trump's jaw tightened slightly. Because this was different. This wasn't about losing a deal. This wasn't about power or politics. This was personal. And for the first time, Trump didn't have an answer ready. The waves crashed. The wind carried the weight of the moment between them. Then, after what felt like forever, Trump exhaled through his nose. "Yeah." X nodded. "Who?" Trump hesitated. His expression flickered, just for a second, and then quietly he said, "Someone I should have fought harder for." Musk sat up slightly. X waited. But Trump didn't elaborate. Instead, he simply leaned back in his chair, looking out at the ocean. He wasn't going to say who. And maybe that was the real answer. X didn't push. He just nodded. Because sometimes silence tells you everything. Trump let out a breath, shaking his head. "All right, kid, you're better at this than some reporters I've dealt with." X smirked. "They don't ask the right questions." Trump chuckled. "Clearly." Musk finally broke the tension. "All right, I think we need drinks after that conversation." Trump grinned. "You're not wrong." As the staff inside moved to prepare their drinks, the three of them sat there, Trump, Musk, and the boy who had just made them both think. And for the first time all evening, nobody spoke. Because for the first time in a long time, both men had something to think about. The sky had darkened, the stars now speckling the horizon as the ocean whispered against the cliffs below. The conversation had slowed, but its weight still hung in the air. Trump leaned back, his usual sharp bravado softened by something quieter, something heavier. Musk sipped his drink, his fingers idly tracing the rim of the glass. X had turned the tide of the conversation in a way neither man had expected. And now it was his turn. A different kind of question. X turned toward his father, studying him. He had spent his entire life watching Elon Musk command rooms filled with the brightest minds in the world, debating artificial intelligence, space colonization, and the future of civilization itself. But tonight? None of that mattered, because in this moment, X didn't care about the entrepreneur, the billionaire, or the visionary. He cared about the man. And so just as he had done with Trump, he asked, "Dad, what's your biggest regret?" Musk's fingers froze against his glass. Trump sat up slightly, intrigued. Musk wasn't the type to dwell on the past. He was always looking forward, to the next innovation, the next launch, the next problem to solve. But this wasn't about rockets or AI, this was about him. Musk exhaled through his nose. "That's a broad question." X tilted his head. "So was yours." A small smirk tugged at Trump's lips. He liked this kid, sharp, relentless, just like him. Musk set his drink down, running a hand through his hair. He knew he had to answer. Dodging it would only make X press harder. So he spoke. "I think—" Musk started slowly, his voice quieter than before. "I think my biggest regret is how much I've missed." X blinked. "Missed?" Musk nodded, looking down at his hands. "I was so focused on building things, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, that I didn't realize how much I was losing in the process." X sat up a little straighter. He was listening now. Trump leaned in, slightly interested. Musk continued, his voice steadier now. "I missed birthdays. I missed first words, first steps. I missed moments that I'll never get back." X's face was unreadable. Trump, however, knew exactly what Musk was saying, because he had lived it too. Musk exhaled, shaking his head. "I always told myself it was worth it, that I was doing something bigger than myself, that one day my kids would understand, that when they looked at Mars, at the future I helped build, they'd be proud." X didn't say anything. Musk turned to him, meeting his gaze. "But the truth is, X, I don't know if that was the right choice." X swallowed. "Would you do it differently?" Musk hesitated. Would he? Would he trade SpaceX for time? Would he trade Tesla for memories? He thought about the late nights in the factory, the hours spent debugging code, the years of sleeping on couches instead of being home. Then he thought about X's childhood. What had he missed? Musk's voice dropped lower. "I don't know." X nodded, as if he understood something Musk himself wasn't ready to admit. Then Trump spoke. let me tell you something about regrets." Both Musk and X turned to him. Trump leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You can spend your whole life thinking about what you should have done differently, about what you missed, about what you lost." He exhaled. "But the truth is, you can't change it. All you can do is decide what you're going to do now." Musk stared at him. X did too, because the simplicity of it hit harder than either of them expected. Musk inhaled deeply. He knew this, of course he did. He had built his entire life on moving forward. But when it came to family, when it came to his own son sitting across from him, it didn't feel that simple. X broke the silence. "So, what are you going to do?" Musk blinked. "What?" X sat back. "You said you regret missing things, so what are you going to do about it?" Musk exhaled, rubbing his temple. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" X smirked. "Nope." Trump grinned. He liked this kid more and more. Musk chuckled under his breath. His son was relentless. And maybe that was a good thing. Musk leaned forward, locking eyes with X. "All right, you win," he said. "I'll take a step back. I'll make more time." X raised an eyebrow. "For real?" Musk nodded. "For real." X narrowed his eyes, skeptical. "Promise." Musk held out his hand. "Promise." X shook it, then smirked. "You're going to have to delete some emails, you know." Musk groaned. "Now you're pushing it." Trump laughed, shaking his head. "Kid's got you, Musk." Musk sighed dramatically. "Yeah, he does." And for the first time in a long, long time, he didn't mind, because in that moment, Elon Musk realized something. The future wasn't just Mars, it was sitting right in front of him.